A new poll from the University of North Florida shows the state of the 2026 Florida governor's race, and it shows it a neck and neck within the margin of error, actually. This is a poll of registered Republicans that showed Casey DeSantis at 32% and Byron Donalds at 29%. Some other interesting nuggets in that, and we're going to break all that down here with UCF political science lecturer John Hanley, who joins us live now via Zoom. And Professor Hanley, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Garrett.
First, I want to get your reaction to just kind of this top line here showing that Casey DeSantis and Byron Donalds kind of very close within each other, 32% and 29%. What do you make of that at this point?
It's not a very surprising number given where we are a year in advance of 2026. So DeSantis has name recognition because her husband has been governor of the state for 7 years. So that's going to be propelling her a little bit. And Byron Donalds has a endorsement from President Trump, right? So that's big for him. And yet there's still 40% of Florida Republicans who haven't chosen between the two or are choosing someone else who's unlikely to make it very far into the race.
Yeah, it's interesting that UNF, when they first asked this question about the governor's race with these candidates back in fall of 2023, that Casey DeSantis was at 22% and Donalds was at 9% at the time. Since then, you mentioned the Trump endorsement. We've seen a lot from Byron Donalds making a lot of appearances and that kind of thing. So it appears that he has made a pretty big jump in that time. How do you think he's been able to do that?
Well, I think the endorsement is huge. Name recognition is really tough for people in politics. If you're not the president or the vice president or someone like Taylor Swift, people tend not to know who you are. And you see someone like Wilton Simpson, who's a long-time Republican state official, and he's at 1% in the polls. And a lot of that is just because people don't really know him, and they don't think of him when they're thinking about who's going to run the state in 2026. Donalds has been propelled by this endorsement into the first tier.
We know we kind of dive into the numbers a little bit in this poll, and it shows that we of registered Republicans, it's the 32% to 29%. But if you look at specifically at just those who participated in the last primary, they have Donalds plus 15. Is that an potential indicator that maybe this race of those who would actually show up to the polls may not be if the primary were held today, would not be as close as it necessarily seems at this point?
It might be an indicator. Normally, we would say, yes, it's an indicator. The only caveat I have is that in 2024, there wasn't much of a Republican primary. By the time it got to Florida, DeSantis was largely distanced. And so if you had participated in it at that stage, that doesn't say very much about you versus someone who looked at it and said, well, there's really nothing to do here. And so I'd rather play pickleball.
You mentioned the undecided vote. How important is that in a primary, and how do these current candidates, in the time we have left, which is quite a bit of time, kind of tailor their message to those undecided voters and try to win them over?
It's a huge question how to deal with the undecided voters. Because in this poll and in this primary, we're only talking about Republicans, there's no partisan identification to rely back on. And so we're not saying, oh, well, the Republicans will vote for this one and the Democrats will vote for that one. These are all Republicans. The candidates are not going to be too different on policy. I imagine that both of them will come out as pretty strident conservatives, and there's not a lot of policy difference, for instance, between Donalds and Ron DeSantis. So it's going to come down a lot to presentation. It might come down a lot to media coverage. It might come down a lot to what are the issues that are talked about in the ads. So it will be fascinating to watch over the next year or so how this race develops.
8%, according to this poll, support Matt Gaetz. And John, we've talked about some of the scandals and the different difficulties facing Matt Gaetz. Does that surprise you to hear that number supporting him in a governor's race?
It's not a terribly surprising number to see 8 for him. Again, he was in the news 6 months ago, but he's largely disappeared from the news. And there's probably a number of people out there who they just hear that name Gates and they don't really remember. And so they say, oh, well, it's Gates. Now, it's possibly interesting that you could have Gates being picked by Republican voters, and that's a sign that they're not enamored of either Donalds or DeSantis. And so it could indicate that there's room for a third candidate in the race. But I don't think it's a terribly good poll for Matt Gaetz. I don't see him gaining a lot of traction as a candidate for the governorship in 2026.
According to the poll, the top issue is property insurance, followed by housing costs. That makes up a big chunk of what respondents to this survey said is the issue that's most pressing to them. Is there a candidate who you think with those affordability issues may have an edge over someone else in this hypothetical Republican primary?
Those are difficult issues to work through. Getting rid of property tax or any tax sounds good. The logistics of doing it are more difficult. How much of those taxes go to fund things like sheriff's department, police, uh, you know, roads, schools. Those are hard things to grapple with. Um, there has been movement in Tallahassee towards a ballot proposition that would change property taxes in the state of Florida. But the devil really is in the details about how you do that and how much relief you can provide to people.
What should we be watching for as this campaign kind of moves forward? I know Casey DeSantis hasn't even announced whether or not she's running. If she decides not to, is this a coronation then for Byron Donalds, you think, on the Republican side?
It could be. You could see that, however, as an opening for someone else to come into the race. Although at this point, it's hard to see who that would be. Um, you know, uh, the numbers there are interesting for DeSantis. I'm sure that their campaign or their organization, is looking into these numbers as well and developing their own numbers. What are her favorabilities? How much is she really able to move forward in this race? Because, she is really up against some difficulty. She doesn't have the Trump endorsement. And she also has a headwind in that she's attempting to succeed her husband, and voters tend not to really be favorable, to people who are looking to succeed their relatives.
UCF political science lecturer John Hanley, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon and breaking all that down for us here on Florida Live.
Thank you, Garrett.